Welcome, everybody. I'm Chip Rogers, President and CEO of the American Hotel and Lodging Association. We're excited that you're with us today. It's another Hot Topic show, and we are especially thankful to our partner in this show, which is Corning. And we've got somebody from Corning here. We'll introduce her in just a second. But today we are talking about a topic that if you're not paying attention to, you're really not doing yourself a favor. We're talking technology, but more importantly, how is technology improving the guest experience? How is technology improving your bottom line? How is technology helping you emerge out of the pandemic in a more profitable way over the long term? And we've got some experts here to discuss this with us. We have Larry Birnbaum. He's the principal advisor at the Zinnius Group. Jessica Janis with Corning, as I mentioned a moment ago. She's the practice leader for hospitality of the Corning Optical Communications. Rado Ivanov, he's vice president of global design for US and Canada for Marriott. And Shannon McCallum is the vice president of hotel operations for Resorts World in Las Vegas. And if you haven't been yet to Resorts World, two things you should know. It is an amazing place, and all that technology inside, when you're connecting to the internet, it's all coming through efforts made possible by Corning. So thanks everybody for joining us today. We love what hotel business does. We love these hot topics, and there is no topic, no hotter topic than technology right now. The reality is hoteliers are trying to find a way to recoup massive losses over the last couple of years. They're trying to find a way to operate in a world with fewer people working at the hotel. And they're trying to find a way to operate in a business environment where consumers, the guests, particularly the leisure guests, are looking for a better, more individualized experience than they've ever had before. And so a lot of headwinds if you're in the hotel business, and technology clearly is one of the answers to solving many of these problems. So I'm going to start with Shannon. Shannon, as you think about the value of real estate, and you're in an amazing property that has just recently opened, what was kind of the process that you were going through, the thoughts that the team was going through when you're constructing and building this incredible hotel casino in Las Vegas, and how technology is going to play a part in the ultimate value of that real estate?
Well, being the newest hotel in the Las Vegas Strip in over 11 years, it was really important for us to take a look at the technology that was out there, because when you're starting fresh, you have the opportunity to look at all of the different technology out there in order to make a new and different and really a forward-looking experience. And our goal was to put the best technology in this location so that we could help to support all of our systems. And without having a really strong infrastructure, I mean, people are traveling now with multiple devices. And if you can't connect, your Wi-Fi, it can be the biggest guest dissatisfier. So really looking to be, how can we be best in class? And that was really what we focused on.
And you've been open for a little while now. And as you mentioned, I would think if you go back 30 years ago, no one was even considering the idea of making sure that you had Wi-Fi in hotels. You're now having to consider the idea that not only do you have to have a strong signal that's covering literally every corner of the building, in the rooms, you've got to have a signal that can be accessed by multiple devices at once. So you've been at it now for a while. The hotels, you mentioned the first one in over a decade built on the Las Vegas Strip. What's the consumer feedback that you're getting on the technology that you put in place?
Our guests are really excited because not only are they connecting 4 or 5 devices per person, they're also bringing their own content and they're streaming it to the TV. So there's different ways they're using the technology at the property. With the pandemic, we've seen a lot of people start to work remotely, and people are traveling on vacation and expect to have the same kind of service that they have at home. And unless properties are investing in their technology, you're not able to keep up. And the consumer decision is so critical. If they come once and they have an issue connecting to the internet or attending a meeting, that will be a decision maker for the future. And properties who aren't investing in their architecture are going to fall behind.
Yeah, again, going back just a few years ago, I don't expect that there were many hotel reviews that included either an attaboy 5-star for the internet connection or a 2-star. I couldn't connect to the internet on a continuous basis. But I would imagine today that's probably one of the main items that when someone's reviewing their hotel stay, especially if they're trying to do the leisure activity of business and leisure combined, that's probably one of the things you're going to get graded on. So it's incredibly important that they have the proper guest experience. And I think, as you pointed out appropriately, it's not just, back in the day when you went on the road, you might, and I can still remember this, you get dial up and you hope to limp through your stay. Now the guest is expecting the same quality and level of service at the hotel that they would get at home. And are you experiencing that?
Absolutely. And even before the pandemic, I think Wi-Fi was becoming important. And I know for me, listening to what the guest tells us is really important, because that's really where you see where you need to invest your dollars in order to improve your service. And Wi-Fi was always at the top of the list, even 5-6 years ago. But now it's even more important. And you can't even operate, like we're at a cashless property. So if our Wi-Fi goes down, it's not just Wi-Fi. It's not just casting to the TV. It's cashless payments that are happening all over the hotel. It's the casino that gets affected. So it's very far-reaching if your Wi-Fi is not strong and you don't have the bandwidth in order to support. But yes, absolutely. Guest feedback is really important. It's a decision maker, and it's one of the top items on the guest list now.
All right, got to remind everybody, this entire show and these topics that we're talking about today is going to be covered in the January issue of Hotel Business, which of course you can find at hotelbusiness.com, and all of the social media. We can keep talking about connecting to the internet, connecting to the world. We're all connected through social media, as is Hotel Business. So of course, LinkedIn and Twitter. And again, we want to remind you that this entire program, if you miss any of it, we're going to go for about an hour today, but if you miss any of it, it will be available online and on demand, the recorded version, at a later time at hotelbusiness.com. All right, let's jump to Jess. So you talk to a lot of owners, Jessica, and folks that run hotels on a daily basis. You sometimes, I would imagine, have to convince them that a investment into technology, and especially an investment in the right technology, may seem expensive on the front side, but in the long term, it is going to return. It's going to have an enormous return on investment, as we just talked about. With the guest experience demanding that you have that type of connectivity. So tell us a little bit about why hotels should employ the best technology, especially right now.
Right, and thanks, Tip. On the infrastructure side, we're really pushing the message that you want to push fiber all the way to the guest room instead of stopping at the IT closets, right? There's a lot of advantages that come to that. But when I give that messaging to various owners, the first thing that comes to mind is, wow, fiber is expensive, right? And it might have been that way. It was tough to install. You think about the white glove treatment and you can't bend it. Not so much the case anymore. And what we're really seeing, especially with new builds, is that we are on par with traditional switched infrastructure, but we're bringing a lot of benefit to the property. Fiber, you can look at it like a 30-year asset. It takes up way less space from those IT closets at Resorts World. Shannon was just talking about the property. The planned number of TR rooms or IT closets was in the hundreds, and we were able to take it down to, I want to say 24 or 26, which gave a ton of space back to the buildings. And with that, you've also got efficiencies in energy. You're not needing as much HVAC to cool those rooms. So there's a lot of things that go into taking fiber to the room that folks don't think about. And when you're looking at materials side by side, or a bill of materials, from a switched architecture to fiber to the room, or Corning, what we call software-defined LAN, we are close to being on parity with new builds. And it's just a matter of how many applications that we're rolling out to the rooms and where you start seeing much more cost savings.
Well, and you mentioned something really important there, Jess. In a hotel, space is a premium. At the end of the day, you're selling space. So if you're able to give back more space, as you mentioned during the construction of this massive project, we'll have to admit that you were able to essentially give back more than 100 rooms. They're now revenue-producing rooms for the hotel, and that's not going to be the case except in new builds. But even if you're coming into a hotel that already exists, giving them back space, I got to imagine that's an enormous benefit for the hotel owner.
Right. And then, I mean, when you start talking about refreshes in technology, and I'm going to kick this one over to Larry. Larry's sitting in a property right now that did take fiber to the room several years ago. Larry, why don't you tell us a little bit about that and what they're looking to do with the refresh?
Yeah, so it's large hotel. It's actually at Marriott World Center today, so that's my room blurred out in the background. But the back in 16 and 17, the ownership and the management made the investment to put fiber through the room, and it was a very efficient design. And today, here we are 5 years later, and the refresh of the network does not include any guest rooms. So the network that was put in then for the guest rooms is still operating. I mean, there's normal maintenance and, small hardware failure piece has to be replaced and that sort of thing. But in terms of a full network refresh to the guest rooms, it's just not required. And, and it was because of the thoughtful planning. Did that answer your question? I can go on about this for the rest of the hour, so I can suck all the oxygen out of the room if you'll let me.
No, we like oxygen, so we'll go on to that.
We'll come back to it.
Yeah, but again, I really want to focus on this because guest experience right now is probably, outside of the challenge with workforce, probably one of the biggest concerns of hoteliers, because let's face it, rates have gone up. There's no question about it. Hoteliers are in some ways benefiting from that. Occupancy is getting back to where it was for 2019, but because of inflation, rates have gone up, and guests are feeling it, and their experience may not be what it used to be pre-pandemic in many ways. But with respect to technology, it's almost like they demand it. Like I get that there might not be enough people that can come clean my room every single day. I understand that. I get that some of the food outlets might not be open the way they used to be open. But what I don't get as a consumer is, why can't I have full-time, high-speed internet? And as Shannon pointed out a minute ago, connected to all my devices, because I don't just live with a single device anymore. So this is an expectation that guests are coming to the property with. And this solution, particularly in and around fiber, seems to be not a short-term, let's get over the hump solution, but a long-term solution that can be built upon. Anyone want to comment on that?
Yeah, I would say to take a key from Jess and Shannon both, the number of applications. So we talk about the guest experience, and the guest experience is critical, right? That's what we're here for. At the same time, as labor-saving devices and other as we've got this convergence of front of house and back of house, there's a whole bunch of operations applications which have to be run essentially on the same network. We don't want to build a separate network for them. So what's happened in a number of projects is, as we look at voice over Wi-Fi, location-based services for assets and people and safety, and 5-star promise for staff alert systems and things like that, this network is now performing at a higher level than just guest Wi-Fi. So the guest will benefit from the network infrastructure that is supporting all of these applications required for whether it be building automation systems or an energy management or other guest, staff use applications. The criticality and security posture we have to take on the in-house applications creates a great deal of benefit for the guest experience.
And just a reminder, if you're watching this, you can, if you're not watching this, you have no idea what I'm about to say. So I assume you're watching it. The Q&A box, if you have questions, we want to answer them. So make sure to send your questions. We did have one. We'll get to that in just a second. But please, if you have any questions, let us know. Rado, I want to go to you because you live in the design world every single day. That's what you do 24/7. What should people be thinking about when they're thinking about what are the trade-offs for designs, for cost, for functionality, when considering this idea of a fiber design network in their property? What are the main considerations?
Chip, listening to Larry and Jess before this question was put up, I recently came across a study from Hotel Technologies, and they found that, and it's a very recent study, 2022, they found that 73% of the guests are likely to return to a property that meets their technology needs. 73%. I mean, this is huge. This is 3/4 of your guests will come back. So when we look at technology, I hear Shannon saying, everything in the room has to function properly. It goes even beyond that, because the guest wants to get on a call, start it in the room, walk in the elevator, go downstairs, grab a bite, carry his phone with him, and come back to the room, and expects all of this to happen seamlessly. And then you're jumping from network to network, from the room to the corridor to the elevator to the lobby and back. And all of this is supposed to run seamlessly for the guest. The guest doesn't care at that point, right? They just want connection. So we need, it's not, when we're talking return on investment, when we're talking initial investment versus long-term, it's not just something that, oh, I put so much technology and I see absolutely no impact on RevPAR or ADR. It goes the other way. It might not impact your daily rate per se, but it will bring your guest back. It will bring your loyal customer back. And that's where the value of the investment is. And not just, we were talking rooms and guest areas, but when it comes to meeting rooms, when it comes to public spaces on properties, one of my big pet peeves from design perspective is meeting spaces. And we spend a lot of time up front, new builds, renovations, to make sure that we have the right built-in technology, screens, speakers, microphones. And I am pretty certain it goes on every property. It takes about 2 weeks before somebody starts bringing in monitors and taping cables to the floor. And we can't get beyond that. I don't know what the solution is, but it goes to Larry's point. It's not just the front of house, it's not just the public and the guest spaces, but it is the back of house, and what happens with housekeeping, and what happens with F&B, and what happens with food ordering, and so on. So it's a much more broader issue and solutions that we have to find collectively. And I think we're getting there, but we build the plane as we fly. As technology is changing so rapidly that you can't. I mean, how long ago was it when we were so excited to have the radios with the little iPhone jack that we can plug our iPhones in, and then it was USB. Then it was in USB. Now it's USB-C. We can't keep up. I mean, these things are changing twice a year, and we renovate hotels every 7 years. So we need to find that balance of being on the cutting edge, but again, sustaining that cycle, or having the flexibility to update mid-cycle without having to tear out walls and millwork.
You brought up something, all of you've actually touched on this, and it's something I think that every owner-operator should consider. Inside of a hotel right now, we're talking about the guest experience, right? The guest, as you pointed out, Rado, going from your room to that elevator where everyone seems to lose their call into the conference room and maybe coming back, having that be seamless is going to create that guest satisfaction, whether intuitively they know it or not. It certainly adds to the guest satisfaction. But what's interesting is that, and Shannon brought this up a minute ago, I'm going to go back to her on this question because I'm intrigued by it. And after I ask the infrastructure question, but it's everybody else in the hotel environment that's also connecting to that same system. Your housekeepers now are connected to that system. Food and beverage is connected to that system. Clearly, security is, everyone is connected to that system. So the system has to work not just for the guests to create that experience, but the system has to work for everybody that works in the hotel so that they can do what they do most effectively. And so, Rado, I want to stay with you on this question of, when you're thinking about what can I do from a technology perspective to improve guest experience, but also to improve operations, and you're thinking about, do I go fiber? Do I not go fiber? What are the checkpoints? What are the questions you should be asking yourself?
I don't think I'm mostly involved with our full service properties, and I don't think the question of fiber sits there anymore. I think it's a matter of what type of fiber and what else can we do with fiber. We just opened, I think it was about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, the St. Clair in Fort Worth. This is a property that invested, and I know Larry and I were talking about this not too long ago. This is a property that decided to go low voltage as much as they can. And it was challenging because the upfront costs were a little higher when it came to the actual systems. But when it came to labor, when it came to savings from not running conduits through the walls, when it came to flexibility, when it came to installation, everything was faster. And then down the road, when they have to replace devices and systems, that same fiber would power the new device, and you don't have to do anything else. And not having to hire a licensed electrician to wire the entire room times 250, it makes a difference, right? So it's not a question of whether we need fiber, it's a question of what else can we do with fiber. And the opportunities are endless. And I think we need to look beyond the cost of a specific device or for linear foot cable. It doesn't work that way anymore.
Right. You're making your network just flexible for the future. You know, a new Wi-Fi revision comes out, or, you know, a new device that wasn't planned when you did your designs. It's unplug the old device and put in the new one, or leave, you know, if you're adding, you've got the dark fiber there, it's a small jumper. And it makes it very easy. Like Rado said, you're not cutting open your walls anymore to rerun cable to bring in new applications.
Yeah, cutting fewer walls is always a good idea. Shannon, I promise to go back to you because I'm really interested in this question. You made the decision, or Hilton made the decision to go cashless, which I think brings a lot to the table, especially, well, I'm not going to get into all the reasons to go cashless, but there's a lot of value there. Would you have done that if fiber were not an option?
I don't know that we would have been able to do that if fiber wasn't an option, just because we would need to have that architecture in place in order to roll it out. And when we're talking about post-pandemic, we're talking about efficiencies and how can we create efficiencies in all areas of our business. And going cashless is absolutely one of those things. There's a lot of repetitive procedures that come with having cash. You also have asset out there as well. So from a business standpoint, going cashless, not only is it great for efficiencies in our business from the operations standpoint, but also for the guest as well. They can charge to their room, they can use their credit card, but you don't have to worry about, you know, not being able to get the right change, et cetera. And really being able to change that flow and put your energy and your resources into the right place. But that being said, it really has to work. If you're going to put all your eggs into one basket and you're going to say, we're going cashless, you can't have your Wi-Fi down. You can't have your payment systems go down because you don't have enough bandwidth. And, you know, just like Rado was saying, you keep plugging new things in. So, you know, when you open a hotel like this, it's just not status quo. You start to use AI for concierge and guests are connecting to that. You've got casino guests coming in. We've got 10,000 visitors at a minimum that come to our property every day, plus, you know, 3,506 guest rooms, plus the 4,000 seat theater, you know, and convention space. So you really have to think, like, who's using this? On top of that, an employee base of 5,500 employees who are all, by the way, using our internal communication system to get updates on what's going on at the hotel, to know which room to clean next. So we continue to look for ways to get efficient, and a lot of times that's adding technology to the existing architecture. So not only is it important that it works, but then what happens if it doesn't work? And what's really important to me as an operator is, what kind of support do I get when I have issues? And that, I think, is a really important component when you're looking at, you know, architecture and what vendors you're going to go with as well, and their reputation in the industry.
Yeah, I think Rado said it best. It's not a question of if fiber, it's a question of whose fiber, which, you know, there are options out there. Some are good, some are better. And you certainly have to consider that. Shannon, I want to stay with you because you're an operator. Every operator I talk to, and whether it's someone running a small independent hotel or to someone like you who runs one of the largest hotels in the United States, one of the largest hotels in the world, workforce is enormously important. We don't have enough of it. We're not going to have enough of it anytime in the foreseeable future. And so if you're going to deliver that guest experience, you've got to make the workforce that you do have more productive in meeting the demands of the guest. And I don't see any other solution other than providing them with the right technology to become more productive. For example, I mean, I check into a hotel, I don't know, it seems like twice a week these days. And sometimes the room's not ready, or maybe even more often, the person at the front desk says, let me check and see if that room is ready. And now they're able to connect with the housekeeper in a way that previously they were not able to. And oftentimes they'll say, oh yeah, that room is actually ready. So for the guest experience, this reliance on technology all the way through the system in a world where we have a smaller or at least a limited workforce, it's absolutely critical. I don't know how you make it if you're not upgrading to the best technology right now.
You have to really review all your systems. And I'm not saying that hotels are perfect yet. We still have manual systems that we have to work with. But the goal is to continue to look for solutions that will help you to be more efficient in your workplace, and then also cut down the steps that the employees need to do so that you can do your check-ins more quickly. Or maybe you can provide an option where the guests can do a digital check-in and they can bypass the front desk. Many hotels are focusing on that as well. And we're fortunate to have a solution here. International travelers don't necessarily have access to cellular service when they're here. So as soon as they step into your lobby, they're looking for a Wi-Fi signal in order to connect, to stay connected to their family back home or business. In all of those things help for us to be able to look at how do we make that stay more seamless? How can we allow that guest to choose their path when they're arriving to the hotel? Some guests choose to come in and check in person because maybe this is their first trip to Las Vegas and they have a lot of questions. Other guests have stayed with us 20 times. They know exactly what they're doing. They just want to get to their room. But definitely looking at how we can continue to improve. And again, having that bandwidth on our infrastructure allows us to continue to add additional technology that can make our service more seamless. And again, we're winning guests and their loyalty by how well our systems are working. And again, if they come and their Wi-Fi isn't working or they get dropped in the middle of a conference call, they're going to remember that and they're going to be worried, well, what'll happen the next time? And because what one experience is translated to something that's consistent with a brand. And when you're building a brand, you really have to try to make it as seamless as possible because you're proving why they should be staying with you. And so it's critical that everything works and that the guests can depend upon the service that you're going to provide.
Well, that is so important, especially in a place like Las Vegas, where there are a lot of options. There's a lot of places you can go and gamble and have a good meal and enjoy entertainment. And if your experience at one place is bad, you're not assuming the next time you want to book that hotel room in Las Vegas that they've fixed the problem. You're just going to assume that they haven't, and you're going to go somewhere else. And so you really get one shot to do this right. And if you do it right, as Rado was pointing out, 75% guests, they look at that and 75% of them say, all right, that's the hotel I want to go back at because it actually works. Question and answer box. Everybody out there that's watching, please jump in. I'll go with one of the questions here. And we've touched on this a little bit. I think Rado mentioned it's not a question of whether fiber, but we did have someone ask the question, what is the current viability of Cat6 cabling regarding bandwidth? And the ability to meet future needs. Jess, I'll go to you on that.
This one I am going to take to Larry, but as far as category 6, this gets a little bit technical on my end, but like I said earlier, fiber's got the bandwidth capabilities to take us, well into the future without limitation. But Larry, I'll let you touch on the Cat.
Yeah, so I would just say category cable is not just an option; it's still required. We talk and think of it in terms of we hear the term the last mile. Right. So then we have the last foot, if you will. So there's category cables that, connect up ITV from the wall jack into the TV. In terms of building infrastructure, category cable, copper, lots of different terms, and there's not to drill down on Cat 6 or Cat 5 or Cat 6E. Those are, they all have their differences. but there's a distance limitation with copper, and we can only go 100 meters with its speed. They also require switching, and then the speed of the traffic across the copper is in large part, based on the speed of the switch. So we've got a distance limitation in with it, but that's okay for, I will say, that last connection. If you have a small hotel, and that's one of the things that, Chip, you had mentioned, and Rada mentioned a smaller hotel, the Sinclair in Fort Worth is 250 rooms. The idea of this technology scales down to an 80-room hotel. As big as Shannon's hotel is, it's just a bunch of little hotels. So all the efficiencies that's gained with the number of telephone rooms and the space savings and conduit and all of those things, all of those savings translate to a smaller hotel. And category cable's not going anywhere. You have to look at the application, what you're trying to accomplish. There's going to be speed limitations in the future. And then there's also the cost of replacing the switches and managing the switches and having the common firmware and software switches. So the idea of a fiber converged network makes it much easier to manage. It requires fewer technical resources long-term, and it's easier to secure. So having said all that, copper is not going anywhere. We're still going to need it, but you have to be thoughtful about it, because even the patch cord that goes from the wall jack to the TV, if it's not the same as the copper that's going through the rest of the building, you're going to create also roadblocks. So if you want to say we're going to use Cat 6E all through the building or go up to Cat 8, everything has to be Cat 8. Because if you think of it as an analogy, all the traffic on a road can only go as fast as the car in front of it. So.
Well, and to tag on to that, it's the number of, if you're going with a switch technology and category cable, the amount of cables needed compared to a fiber jacket, you're talking, you run it with fiber to the room, and it's a small little single pole of fiber and your copper conductor underneath with Corning's Actify. Category cable, going to Wi-Fi 7, you're going to need multiple draws to get there. In every application, you're going to need another cable pole. So part of the benefits of taking fiber is you don't need those large cable trays anymore. You could potentially get away with J-hooks or a very small cable tray, which also reduces your footprint, on the floor, and it's not as much to take out to the guest room.
So we were talking a lot about fiber kind of as the basis of the infrastructure necessary to build off of. Rada, I want to go back to you again, because this is what you do every day. You design these things. I'm going to read a question that someone put in and a question that I have that they actually kind of work together. The question from one of the viewers is, guest satisfaction is obviously a big driving force for everything that we do in hospitality, but guests come in all shapes and sizes and have different needs and wants. Given that, how do we establish the proper responses? I'm going to add on to that. You're hearing a lot about technology, and as an owner operator, you're hearing guests want this and guests want this and guests need this and guests deserve this and this will help guest satisfaction. If you're to sit back and say, all right, where do I start? Because I think that's a question that a lot of owners and operators have. Like, what's the first thing I need to do if I'm going to deliver all of these guest demands? What would you answer to that question?
So the selection of technology, the first part of the question is a great one. We only have so many dollars we can put in technology. We only have so much space that we can provide. And I think it comes down to the demographics, the target demographics of the property. It's one thing if you are in a Moxie hotel in Silicon Valley, most likely your demographics are younger people, very tech savvy. They need everything and anything, and they can deal with something that's not very user friendly as long as it's serving their purpose. You go on to I don't know, somewhere in an urban market or a leisure market where you have a lot of families, people with different tech skills, technology needs to be very simple. It might not be the highest speed internet. It should handle a video call, but it needs to be very simple. I was at a property in Vegas, actually, but not one of Shannon's, in full disclosures. And I walk in the room, and I think I am tech savvy. I deal with technology all the time. I swear it took me about 5 minutes to figure out how to turn on the lights, because it's this touch panel that controls everything from the TV to the curtains to the lights to the radio to everything else, the music in the room. Beautiful technology, but for somebody who is not familiar, that is actually a drawback, and they actually not use any of it, or they use the absolute minimum. So finding that balance, really, you have to know who you're working with, who's your guest, who's your demographics, excuse me, demographics, and then go from there. As for how to select, again, you would go by the budget that you have, but at the very minimum, to Shannon's earliest point, to Jess's earliest point, you can't, the Wi-Fi is given. The Wi-Fi has to work everywhere. The Wi-Fi has to work throughout the building, the public spaces, the room, and everything else. It comes down to also things like mirroring your Netflix account or your Amazon Prime account on the TV. That used to be a big no-no, because the properties were like, well, we'll lose all the revenues from people buying movies. Not the case. How many movies do you need to buy if that person actually decides to stay the weekend instead of leaving on Friday night after the business meetings are done, and they make it a leisure trip, and they stay an extra night or extra 2 nights? You'll buy a lot of movies for that. So it's not about the instant satisfaction, the instant gratification and dollars. It's about keeping that guest happy and have them stay longer or have them come back.
So I'm going to throw out a technology pet peeve. Rado, you mentioned in many of these new hotels, when you walk in, they have the panels that control all the lights and everything you want. Just suggesting to anyone designing this moving forward, if you don't put the lettering on there at a size where people can read it, it's very frustrating, because it's usually dark in the room, and you just end up pushing all the buttons to try to figure out what works. So you got to have the lettering at the size that actually works. I'm going to throw this out to both Larry and Shannon. I've talked about it a lot. In fact, almost every topic that I talk about in some way ties back to this. We've mentioned it here, a lack of workforce. This is not going to be solved overnight. This problem has been with us. It will be with us moving forward. So how is technology helping or hindering this labor market challenge that we find ourselves in over the long term? Larry, Shannon, question to both of you.
I defer to Shannon. She's got a much bigger workforce.
I would say that technology has been our friend. Actually, there's so much pressure on us right now to work more efficiently, and coming out of COVID, we had to scale back services and in order to be able to make it through. But the guest expectations are still there, and they're higher than ever because the rates are higher than they were before due to supply chain and other items. So technology can be a wonderful assistant when you're looking at something like a call center operation, for example. Being able to integrate AI into that operation to handle simple tasks, cut down the number of phone calls that you're receiving that a person has to answer. So if it can be integrated into your other systems like Hot Sauce or more of the task management systems, then you can actually streamline the calls, handle more volume with less people, which helps you with that shortage in staff. It's also having a culture. And I know pulling culture into this is a bit of a stretch when we're talking about technology, but not so much, because technology is being used to now build culture and to communicate to your teams and to become that place that people want to work because they feel more connected. And I think that is something we can't overlook these days when you're being competitive. in the work market to bring people to your property to become part of your team and keep them connected. Because again, it's not just recruiting and having people come and making processes easier, but how do you retain and keep people engaged? And having that wide architecture that allows us in front and back of house to be able to stay connected, not only with our guests, but our employees, is a huge benefit.
And Chip,
interesting you said that. Yeah, go ahead, Rado. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to add to what Shannon was saying. I can't agree more. This topic always comes up. You know, the machines will take over, and you know, robots will replace housekeepers, and kiosks will be in place of front desk associates. That's really not the case. I mean, let's face it. Who got into hospitality for vacuuming corridors or cleaning bathrooms? I don't think there's a single person that can say that honestly. And the idea is the technology is there not to replace people. It's to place people in the right place. You don't want somebody vacuuming a corridor if they can be downstairs greeting guests, interacting with guests, providing what they need, and contributing to the actual experience versus being in the back of house somewhere and having to deal with tasks that nobody wants. And it has also the other side. I mean, it's not a secret for anybody. Labor is a huge issue in our industry right now, and you can find it goes from builders and contractors, it goes through operations, and it goes through all the way up to above property labor. And being able to, what if you can't, going back to the St. Clair, what if you don't need to find an electrical contractor that's busy building data centers and you can't find one around the country? What if you can do all of this with the low voltage contractor or the majority of it, and you need the electrical contractor just for something, so just for the big systems and the backup. There's so many layers to it, but I really don't see a downside of technology when it comes to solving labor issues.
I would say that, I'm sorry, I was going to say, I would say that it comes down to what I call enablement. So for example, we want to have the staff be able to communicate more efficiently. Chip, you gave a great example of room not ready and being able to quickly identify, you know, which one's available and that sort of thing. So now what we have to have is staff communications in areas of the property where we didn't think we needed them before, because Wi-Fi was a guest amenity. So now we want to have Wi-Fi border to border, you know, all across the property stakes, employee cafeterias, just everywhere, you know, parking areas. So now we say, okay, we want to create a communications enablement platform across the entire property. And so, okay, how do we do that? And then also account for the fact that the devices we use are smaller and smaller. So when everybody thinks of Wi-Fi as like broadcast, I don't want to get into a technical discussion on it, but we think of it in terms of broadcast. The real elegance in Wi-Fi is being able to listen. A laptop with an antenna and an unlimited power supply, you know, can talk to an access point really easily. A tablet is a third less efficient than a notebook. A cell phone is a smartphone is a third less efficient than a tablet. So you get smaller and smaller devices that need to smaller and smaller devices needing to connect to the network. It's easy to yell and be heard. The hard part's listening. So we have to be able to put access points in places where the devices can communicate back. And it requires a really thoughtful process. And Rado and his team, you start with the end in mind and work backward from that. And that's what the design is. So we want to have these applications operating in these areas, and then the design work backward from there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was going to say, and Shannon really brought this up a minute ago, but we've all touched on it. If I ask the question of every one of you, everyone watching this, or anyone outside your office right now to say, hey, hold up your phone, every one of us would be able to do that in 2 seconds, because everyone is connected all of the time. So it's not a matter of whether we're connected. How are we going to use that connectivity? What are we going to do with it? And what is the underlying system that will help us better maximize that connectivity in ways that will make our workers more efficient, provide a better guest experience, ultimately either create or enhance profit at a property. Jess, I want to segue on this particular question to you, because we're talking about this in the context of hotels and hospitality. And I hope that folks are listening to this and they're saying, yeah, if I don't have the right underpinning, if I don't have the right system to work off of, to build off of, I might be in trouble. But you've seen this in other industries who have deployed technology in a way that has been extremely beneficial. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. So I do come from, the sports and entertainment background, which is very complementary to hospitality. And, what we're seeing a lot these days is the entertainment districts that are surrounded by restaurants and hotels. And, it's a multi-use environment, but it's centered around an arena or, a stadium. And so, what happens? You look at your guest journey, whether they're staying on property at one of the hotels or whether they're driving in, locally to see their favorite team play. So you look at Little Caesars Arena in Detroit, which is a full Corning system. They went with our distributed antenna system, and they want to make sure that their guests, as they get in, their guests and fans, as they get to the venue, cellular works. They've got robust Wi-Fi and everything else. And so they took fiber to the edge there. And then the Ilitch Holdings, owns the building and everything around there in Detroit. They continued to do our software-defined land and took fiber all the way out to the edge in their commercial buildings because they saw the benefits to the longevity of fiber, the long reach application. So, Larry talking about looking at your hotel properties and, you now want to cover Wi-Fi all the way down to the pool or the beaches. Going traditional, you've got limitations in distance. The fiber will take that all the way out to the edge. So, back to these entertainment districts, there are different owners and operators involved all throughout them, but if there is a very strong, robust fiber network, it makes it very flexible to do the various applications that need to be done at each of those facilities.
Well, I could not agree more. Wasn't that long ago, you would go to a sporting event and you would almost have to just accept the fact that once you got inside of a full stadium, you just weren't going to be connected because there just wasn't the strength. And first, and I know all of you and those who know me well know what a rabid sports fan I am. I hate to go to the stadium and not be able to look on my phone and see what my fantasy team is doing because I can't connect. But now in most places, and you mentioned Detroit really leading the way on this, and in most places, it's getting better, but it is absolutely a guest expectation that just because I walk into a full stadium, that I'm still going to be connected. And these entertainment districts, people are they're being entertained in a different way. I'm going to use Atlanta, for example, my original hometown, where the Braves built this magnificent stadium, but in and around it is the entertainment district. And there are not just thousands, but tens of thousands of people who go on game day to that location, not to go actually in the stadium, but to enjoy the environment and just be around it. And if they're not connected, they're not going to show up. And so it absolutely is critical, not just in the context of, do I go to a hotel and in the furthest room at the top of the building, am I going to get connectivity? It's really everywhere in my life. And this is what guests are expecting.
Now, from the parking structures, they want to be up, everything is becoming ticketless, right? And cashless, like Shannon's facility. And that phone needs to work, regardless of if it's offloaded onto a Wi-Fi network or if it's cellular. And if it doesn't work, you've got congestion at all of your entry points. Getting out of the parking structure might be a challenge. So everything has to be thought of from the whole journey, egress, and it's incredible what goes into it. And if one little thing goes down, I can guarantee you the network administrator is going to hear about it and say, your network doesn't work. And it's not the application.
Yeah, Shannon, jump in here.
Yeah, so sorry. I would just add, we're not even talking about safety and security. And of course, in the hospitality realm, that's really important to us. And having room attendants that are carrying panic devices and being able to communicate to all of your team members across the property and not have zones that maybe the Wi-Fi doesn't reach. That's super critical to our operations all over the world to make sure our employees are safe. So when we're thinking about the guest journey, there's also a whole nother component of really making sure that our work environments are safe and without gaps in service.
Yeah, that's becoming a mandate in many places, not just from a brand, but even laws are being passed mandating that, which we fully support. You know, a number of years ago, AHLA started the 5-Star Promise. It was really to bring the industry 100% aligned around this personal safety device. And what's interesting, Shannon, and I know you see it as an operator each day, is that by giving these personal safety devices and the connectivity that comes with those personal safety devices to your team members that are out throughout the hotel, it creates a feeling of safety, and it creates an understanding that you're investing in their safety, which translates into people staying on the job and not leaving. We've actually run the numbers, and we've seen that those employees that have personal safety devices that work are much less likely to quit their job than those who don't. So for the labor challenge, that always seems to come back to, this is a critical point that you got to be connected to your employees wherever they are on the floor. We're kind of running out of time. Jess, you mentioned something about electronic tickets. It's the only thing I disagree with everybody on. I hate electronic tickets. You know why? I want the ticket stub to remember the event. In my house, I went to like everything at the 1996 Olympic Games in Atlanta, and I got all those ticket stubs and it's on the wall. I can't do that with an electronic ticket. So go back to paper tickets. Everything else can be digital. Rado, tell me about the swings that you have seen in guest satisfaction rates once a new technology and the proper technology is implemented in a hotel.
There's no doubt, and again, it depends on how much of an improvement the property is making. But it wasn't that long ago, hotel apps were not a thing. We've been using airline apps forever, right? I mean, when was the last time you got a boarding pass? I don't know if you collect those as well, Chip, but it's been a while since I've seen a paper one, unless I get upgraded, which doesn't happen, unfortunately, as often as I wish. But it's been around forever. Those apps for airlines. For hotels, it's relatively recent. And even with the apps, and people love them, and they use them for booking and everything else, they still walk into the hotel and they go to the front desk. It's that habit, but it's also the expectation. This is not simply a service. This is not a place where you just go to spend the night. You go for the experience. You go for the interaction. You go for feeling valued and somebody paying personal attention to you. So the technology has to account for all these specific things that are so unique to hospitality. I think earlier when we were talking about the systems and the reliability, it goes also to the point where hotels don't have the luxury of downtime. We're not an arena where we have another week before the next game. We're not an office where we have the weekend and somebody can fix things over the weekend. If you don't have that reliable system, if you don't have that reliable network, you are taking floors down, if not the entire property. And where is the cost of that? How do you account for that? Even if it's for one night or one day, what happens to your guests that are already there? To Shannon's point, they're cashless. I mean, literally they can't take the payment for let alone anything else. They can't feed people. It's very complex, and it's not one solution fits all. But the more we improve and the more seamless it becomes, it definitely reflects on guest satisfaction. Unfortunately, we hear mostly about the negative experiences because people are very excited to write something about something that doesn't work, much more than about something that, wow, I was able to take all my calls and never got dropped and anything. You hardly ever see that. But it's on the top of the priority list of our guests from what we've seen from a guest satisfaction surveys.
So that's a challenge to everybody. When everyone goes to Shannon's new lovely hotel, and I've been there before, let's make sure that we leave a review that says, you know what, the Wi-Fi is outstanding at this place. Everywhere you go, it works perfect. So that's a challenge for everybody. We are running out of time, but I wanted to get to Shannon real quick. Shannon, you've gone through this, you've experienced it. You're now up and operating and doing so very well. For the hotel operator or the hotel developer who's thinking about, do I do this or do I not do this? What would you tell them?
I would say absolutely do this. You need to continue to expand your services. You can't be limited by not having an architecture that is going to support that. Because you're going to want to continue to have new offerings, and it will really limit your ability to keep up with the other properties that are out there that are investing. So it's a big deal, and it's getting even more important to our guests every single day as they travel and they want to do more at our properties. Not just sleep in the room, but they want to be able to continue to work and to be able to enjoy their shows that they bring with them on their devices. So I absolutely would encourage operators to continue with an investment like this.
And Larry, to you, final question. It's along the same lines. As someone who's building a hotel, or in some cases rebuilding a hotel, how should you be thinking about investment into technology? Like, you're going to buy beds, you're going to buy televisions, you're going to buy carpet. How should you be thinking about technology investments?
But from my point of view, you should think long-term. I mean, like really think long-term. Everybody's got an investment horizon, and they we're at the end of the day, it's a real estate business as well, and real estate gets bought and sold. But my first job was dishwasher. It's what's now a Marriott in Atlanta. That was a really long time ago. That building was built a really long time ago. It's still functioning as a hotel, and it has bones. And you look at a house or a building, if you're the investor, and you say, it's, what are the bones of the structure? And if you put, the right infrastructure in, it becomes part of the bones, and even increasing the value of the real estate for the next owner to be able to say, oh, I'm buying an asset that has infrastructure that I do not have to invest in. It's already been made. And then that gets figured into. The other thing that I would say is focus on IP. All of the different technologies we've talked about, even if it's, safety buttons and just all the point of sale and all of these different applications, at their core, they run on IP. So if you put in a very solid IP infrastructure, then you can have a platform to host multiple applications, change out your applications. If Shannon's group decides they're going to change their point of sale system, that's fine. They don't have to put it on the network. They just plug everything back in. Yeah. So I would say focus on having a long term of a very solid IP infrastructure.
Final word goes to my friend Jess, and we want to again thank Corning for making this possible today. Jess, if those watching and listening are not sold on the idea that fiber is an important infrastructure need, I'm not sure what else we can say, but I suspect they're sold on the idea they need fiber. The question is, which fiber? And that was asked earlier. What should people be considering when looking at a provider?
A provider such as an OEM?
No, when someone's saying, I'm convinced that the next hotel I build, we're going to start with this idea of fiber infrastructure, but I know there's a lot of people offering it. What should I be looking at to determine who's best?
The most important thing is to get with your technology consultant or who is going to design it, right? And work backwards, like Larry and Rado said earlier, is like, what do we want to enable today versus what do we think might be coming in the future? And start designing backwards to make sure it is robust enough so you're not cutting open your walls, so you're not having to replan at a later date. And getting very close with that consultancy community is very important because we'll have your best interests. I'd love to be that person for you, but however, obviously I've got the Corning badge on today, but Larry's great. And there's a lot of other consultants in the community that are very friendly to the fiber approach.
Absolutely. Well, listen, and you guys are very friendly. Thanks for spending an hour with me and all of our guests. We appreciate your time today. So for Shannon, Rado, Larry, and my friend Jess, thank you so much. And to all the folks at Hotel Business, we appreciate you providing this platform. Again, this will be featured in the January edition of Hotel Business. It'll be at hotelbusiness.com and, of course, all throughout Hotel Business social media. So thanks, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Chip.
Thank
you, Chip. Thank you, Jess. Thanks.